Morning all. I had a very interesting game last night. It was in the Russell Trophy. It's a knockout cup in the Hertfordshire Chess League. So Barnet were home playing against Bishop Stortford. I was playing against Kevin White. I was with the black pieces. So let's actually flip the board. So d4 from Kevin. I played knight f6. He played g3. And actually, coincidentally, my good friend Nxd4 was showing me a game from the London Classic where his opponent played g3, not playing c4 that quickly, and it's quite tricky. I don't know if I was influenced by things, a little bit maybe, as we're going to see. c5, after knight f3, c takes d4. So okay, I'm getting this semi-open c-file pressure potentially, but after knight takes d4, if I'm not careful, white can set up a bind potentially one day and have pressure down this d-file. So it's a bit like a Semi-Maroczy bind in effect. In the Maroczy bind there are two pawns here clamping down on d5, but with the fianchetto bishop here there's a lot of pressure on d5 anyway. There's not necessarily needed to have a pawn on e4. We see knight c6, I played knight c6, bishop g2. And here's some influence perhaps from Nxd's game. This early queen b6, which can be annoying. It's driving the knight back. There's no bishop e3 here. Let's have a quick look theoretically at Livebook in this position. Actually, the most common move here is to play e6 after c4. Now queen b6 is interesting, and a quick d5. You see this liberating break here is very, very interesting. I don't think white can afford to take a pawn here. This looks silly because of bishop h3. So add a bit here as well. I mean, just bishop h3 and you stopped white castling. So yeah, this kind of thing, breaking that Maroczy bind, I think I was a little bit oblivious to it. It should also be noted though, it seemed to be at some point, well, very, very hot in the venue last night. I don't know if there was a heating issue, heating system problem, but anyway, so knight b3. I played a move which isn't really seen that much at all. Usually black is constructing e6 and d5 here in the center. For some reason I was keen to fianchetto, but it might not be right here. e6 is the most common move. If we have this quick construction again, what I've just shown you, there's no bind then. White's kind of being punished for not playing c4. Well, you might think, well, hypermodern, could this center be attacked? Well, this is what's more commonly played, and it doesn't seems about equal really. If the queen goes back there, it's not a big deal. Striking in the center here, it doesn't seem to be such a big deal. You know, maybe white's got a small advantage, but it's not amazing for white. But I have a preference sometimes for a fianchetto, so I did actually go for a fianchetto here with g6. Again, though, it's not a great big deal. It's just transposing into other lines. So for the moment, let's have a look. So here, my opponent did play an unusual move. Usually c4 is played. My opponent played knight c3. So that's quite interesting. Piece pressure instead of putting a pawn on c4. After castles, now a4. So this immediate knight c3 does seem to pose some problems. If I played a6, for example, here, I was a bit concerned about a5, but maybe it isn't as big a deal as I imagined. I thought the b6 square was a big problem. If we play bishop e3, d6 say, is this such a big deal? The engines I have here doesn't seem to think it's a big deal at all, this position. Maybe a small advantage for white, but no big deal. That's quite interesting to consider, just allowing this position, just a6 might be plausible, or d6 as well. If a5, something like queen a6 or queen c7, again, what is white actually threatening? I don't think a6 actually does anything to try and undermine the diagonal. Bishop d7 and black's okay. So let's go back. So a4, a5, bit committal here. Knight b5 was played, and now I played d6. Apparently this is about equal anyway, this position that I've reached at. H3, bishop e6, and now Kevin plays bishop e3. My queen just goes all the way back to d8. Knight on 3 to d4. And now I think it's quite a good move in the circumstance. Given that white hasn't played c4, there is the d5 square available for bishop d5 to challenge this bishop. I thought I was a little bit more optimistic after this move. Before this move, I was actually a little bit pessimistic about my position. I wasn't sure how I'd free my position or generate some play. Obviously, I've got a tempo gain available soon with queen d7. But okay, so we see this move, bishop d5, knight f3. And now queen d7 does seem like a tempo gain, because I'm threatening, it seems bishop takes f3 to take on h3 if bishop takes f3. King h2. I'm actually okay here. The engines actually like black's position here. Rook ac8, rook c1. I think here is where I start going a bit astray. There's actually quite a good idea apparently for knight b4, which, for example, c3, there's knight a6 now, and this knight coming in to c5 could be quite handy. So say b3, knight c5, c4, bishop e4. With this blockade on c5, it looks as though c5 is not a problem. If c5 is not a problem, the d-file pressure cannot be celebrated that much. I think this position is quite stable for black. It's when white has that c5 break that this can get very dangerous. Also, of course, this is quite nice to have this pressure along the diagonal. If this knight moves, I can just snap this off and weaken my opponent's king position a little bit. But this h5 doesn't really help my position. I played h5, and now he just plays c4, which I thought actually was going to be a blunder because of bishop takes f3. So I'm actually potentially damaging my opponent's pawn structure here, because after takes knight e5, threatens knight takes f3 and knight takes c4. And my opponent indicated he actually missed this, but so he plays b3, which is actually okay. It doesn't matter, it seems, about the double pawns. Knight takes f3, e takes. Basically, if you look at this, white has a very dynamic position now, because even though it's double pawns, there's pressure potentially blasting down the e file as well as the d file, and there's no breaks on c5 here. If white can just put pressure down the d file, then c5 is quite damaging. Not only that, this pawn is kind of a problem pawn here. It's a loose pawn, and I can't really support it with b6. The bishop's eyeing this diagonal. So I've actually set up a very uncomfortable position. Technically, the engine's indicating about 0.32 here for white. I play h4, which probably again doesn't really help the position much. Queen d2. It hits a5 here. I was wondering really what to do about this now. I play rook a8, rather meek. Is there any other alternative? Apparently taking here might be a good idea in the circumstance. Queen d8, but white is significantly better now. Bishop g5. There's a massive grip on the position here. I've given my opponent essentially lots of dynamic pressure down the d and e files with a beautiful knight on b5. Now in the game it's a little bit similar to this. I play rook a8. I can start to feel the bear grip. There's this famous Petrosian and Fischer game where he talks about this bear grip, bear hug, and Fischer was lucky to escape with a draw. I was wondering, I'm starting to feel it here. After hg, fg, I'm sort of running out of ideas. I'm faced with c5 and potentially bishop b6 actually to win this a pawn. So this is just, I don't know what to do here. I played king h7. Doesn't really help the position. Just, it's a beautiful position for white now. I'm a bit fortunate in the time limit for this game. It's 80 moves. Sorry, not 80 moves. It's 80 minutes for all moves. So I thought maybe, well, I can create some complications later, without it getting adjudicated or adjourned in a terrible position. Hopefully there's going to be a bit of a fight later. King g2, king g8, and he just parries this with g4. I've moved my king back. I'm just waiting for white to strike, actually, with c5. But also, c5 is very strong here now. And it seems, you know, white is perfectly configured for c5 in this position. But also bishop b6, I mean, it just seems to, you know, forcibly win a pawn. If rook a6, bishop takes, where's the compensation for that pawn? The bishop can come back here, perhaps, later. So there's two moves which seem absolutely crushing. I felt helpless at this point. Absolutely helpless. For c5, I don't know what I really do here. What can black actually do? I mean, what does black do? If d5, there's actually g5 here. That's actually winning d5. We'll examine some possibilities slightly similar to this, but I think after white's next move, which was bishop g5. So actually, in this position, even without bishop g5, just leaving that rook blocked in, c5 here does appear very powerful. The engine suggestion is e6, just basically giving up the d pawn. Knight d5, there's nothing. White's a clear pawn up, basically. So this was a bit of a grim position I actually put myself into. But anyway, bishop g5 was played, keeping the torture on, but removing bishop b6 as a possibility. Rook he8. It's not one of my greatest positions with black in recent games. I have been playing black in a lot of games though. So queen e3 was played here. Apparently quite a crushing move is queen f4. This sets up, what does queen f4 set up, you might think? Well, it sets up bishop takes f6, because if bishop takes f6 there's g5 on f7. Just to demonstrate that, say rook d8, bishop takes, now if bishop takes f6 there's g5 and then taking on f7. So that's a pretty powerful move is queen f4. c5 again is quite good, and this is the sort of thing we're looking at here for d5. So say bishop takes, e takes, and we thought there might be something for black, but we weren't entirely sure. In this position, actually black does have rook e2. It's not so straightforward here after queen e8. But essentially, if white plays the right moves, it should be able to consolidate with a big advantage there. Again, a pawn up. So this is actually quite dire. My opponent Kevin actually recommended. He thought rook d8. I'm not really entirely sure about rook d8. Again, queen f4 with this idea of bishop takes f6 is pretty nasty. I mean, even the knight is contributing towards this d-file pressure very, very nicely. You know, rook c8 here, bishop takes. If g takes, then we just, you know, rook takes d6 basically. And if bishop takes, again that idea of g5. So it's actually a really, really grim position here. I'm afraid to say this is, but my excuse is it was exactly like playing. Well, it was a bit like playing in a sauna. I've not actually visited saunas much, but from what I gather on TV, it was very, very intensely hot at the time. And around about here, I went to get a drink from the bar, my first drink, try and just cool down. I really didn't like my position at all. So queen e3 was played, so not playing c5 I thought was a let off. Now I can play queen c6. I thought I was let off there. And now queen f2. I play now king g8, getting my king out of any firing line here with check. Bishop f4, and I thought, well, what's going on here? I think my opponent's starting to let me off, surely, because I've got now knight d7, and I'm securing that c5 against c5. And the evaluation is dropping now. It's like less than half a pawn for white. So I think the worst is over at the moment. Knight c5, queen e3. I thought, isn't this nice now for e5? Even though I get a backward pawn, I can play tactically here. I play e5. The idea is, well, if rook takes d6, then I can just, you know, take here. My queen's actually protecting e8 as well, so there's no trick here. That's winning for black. So he plays bishop g5. I play e4. So the idea here now is if rook takes d6, well, I've got e takes, and then rook takes e2 check. So that's no good. So now after e4, I'm kind of liberating my position a bit. I thought I can block this d pawn now with knight d3, and I thought I'm back in the game a little bit. But this is something else now is horrible happening in the position. In this position, white has f5. It's actually a very, very good move. I think that's actually one of the best moves in the position. f5. It threatens quite nasty, you know, f6. You can imagine black getting mated shortly after bishop f8, bishop h6. It's like this is a very, very dangerous pawn there. Technically, from an engine point of view, rook e5 is best here. Let's have a look at rook e5. So if f6, bishop f8, bishop f4, apparently this is a little bit better for white. Looks mighty dangerous, to be honest. If bishop h6 here, let's see, the tactical idea is d5 to be on f6 here. So cd, queen takes f6, and black is actually better. So that's interesting. This whole thing with rook e5. But no, I played actually g takes f5, which is a very optimistic move to try and use the g file against white's king later. But let's see. That can work both ways. Both ways, that road actually. I play now f6, and here apparently there's a really crushing move for white, bishop h6. Exactly why this is crushing is basically white can use the g file. I think rook e7, there's king h2. White's using the g file. Both rooks are ready to use the g file here, and also the queen. If king h7, queen g3, there's a crushing check here. So this again, I was let off again here. My opponent Kevin played bishop h4, and again I don't play. Probably the best move I should is probably d5 apparently. There's king h7 played now, and there's a big flaw in this, and I was actually starting to feel quite sad at this point, thinking, no, I'm not really that great tactically, because what is wrong exactly with queen g3 in this position? This was during the opponent's turn. I was wondering, queen g3, and what do I do about queen g6 check exactly? I thought that would be it. Queen g3 is really the end of the game here. There's a spike check, but now, you know, what happens here? I would have to do something like this. I'd have to lose e3. It doesn't look very good. I'm losing then d6. My position's collapsing. Some miracle again happened. I don't know. Maybe the temperature of the room was affecting both of us. Knight d4 instead of queen g3. And I should play, apparently the best move is bishop h6 here, to take the opportunity for bishop h6. It does mean rook g8 then is possible, potentially. But no, I don't play this. If knight takes c6, for example, then apparently this is nearly equal disposition after d5. What does white do here? If queen g3, then check, and we have this position, which is slightly better for white, for Kevin White. So, okay, no, I didn't play bishop h6. I played queen c5. But now let's have a look. Queen g3 here. I thought the idea was actually I can actually play queen takes d4 here, and that's true. Queen g6 is not devastating here apparently, so it does have that going for it. But my opponent does have knight e6. I thought almost this would be tenable. I was looking at this variation with queen takes f5 here, and I was looking at queen takes e4. Apparently this is no good actually for white. Takes. There's actually rook takes e6. I didn't see this in my calculations. I was thinking of just moving the knight, I think. But rook takes e6. There's that check on f4 here, so that's actually winning for black this position after rook takes e6. But okay, but there's actually a better move for white. Knight takes g7. If king takes rook f1, there's pressure on f6 here. This is starting to get nasty again. But this didn't happen. This didn't happen either. White played the move rook f1, which is a terrible mistake. Can you guess why? Bishop h6. Where's the queen going here? It's quite a nasty position now because there's rook g8 to queen g3, and all of a sudden it's over. Despite all the comical errors of this game, it seems I've turned the tables totally here. So white plays knight e6, and I just take this off to win my rook. Yeah, win a rook. After bishop takes f6, I can finish quite neatly now. I just play rook takes e6. That's a forcing sequence. After takes check, king h2. I just play knight f2, which sets up bishop f4 mating. My opponent plays bishop h4. I played check, and now he resigns. He has to put the bishop in front, be 2 pieces down. It's not a game I'm actually very pleased with. I think conceptually I just completely underestimated the binds that white would set up. If we go back to the position after I double the pawns, this is actually an incredibly powerful bind here that white has in this position. If you look at it, even though I've doubled pawns, if white's got pressure along the E file as well as the D file, fantastic knight on B5, everything is really set up for playing this C5 move. It just seems to be a very, very lucky escape, this game, but it was played on a much faster time limit than usual in this Hertfordshire Cup. Usually it's a much more leisurely pace, but it was all moves in 80 minutes. I think that had something to do with all the blunderful play. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.